Hi everyone, we're live here at Mud Hall, and you guys are actually having your last service right before you're about to go to spring break. And so some of you guys probably saw us actually videotaping. But we wanted to do something different this spring break because the spring break happens to fall 1 week before the Easter. And so as you guys are away for a whole week every day, and you'll be coming back literally 1 week right before the Easter service, we just wanted to make sure that you don't come back really kind of not thinking about God or not having any kind of spiritual moments with God. And so we decided to do something different. We have never done this before, and so I don't know how this is going to be. We appreciate some of your feedback if you have a chance to tell us how this experience was for you. But we're going to create 2 videos, and one of them is this. And what I want to do is I kind of want to give you an opportunity to think about Lent and Easter, even as you're away for spring break at home and as you're enjoying your time with your folks and your friends. I want to give you time to really think about some things and spend some moments here and there. You don't have to spend all your time doing it, but we just want to give you an opportunity to think about some things each day as you're away, and some of the things that as we think about, especially Easter. I want us to kind of think about life of Jesus, especially, and it's as you come back, perhaps from that Sunday on, as we have a service. And the week leading up to Easter, there's going to be morning prayer and things like that that would really help us to think about Easter. But as you're away, I wanted to kind of share perhaps some passages and some thoughts that you can think about as you're home as well. And so I hope you really use this time in this video to help you in your walk with God as you're resting at home and away from the busyness of school life. And so I really had actually 7 topics in mind. And I would say these are the 7 things about life of Jesus. 7 things that really highlight his life, 7 moments that really sticks out in some ways as to who and what Jesus was really about. If I were to kind of condense some of this into 2 categories, and that's not easy to do, but I thought about what would be some 2 big categories or chunks of things that kind of represent life of Jesus. And I think one definitely that sticks out for me and that stands out for me is the fact that Jesus, even though he had this tremendous mission of having to save the world by dying on the cross, and that was definitely foremost on his mind and his thought, I'm sure, that he still spent his time, his life in this world, really focusing on people and the relationship with people. And I'll talk a little bit at the end of this kind of sharing as to why that's important, but I just wanted to kind of tell you a little bit more about what I'm talking about. And the first passage that I want us to look at, and once again for the next 2-3 days, I want you to reflect on this video and the passages that I'm going to put out forward. And so first passage that I want you to think about is John chapter 12. And in John chapter 12, it says that just 1 week before the Passover, okay? 1 week before actually the crucifixion, okay? It says in John chapter 12, verse 1, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Okay? What I want to focus on in that passage, and especially in John chapter 12, is that Jesus, in the very last week of his life in this world, okay, that what he chose to do was not to do more ministry and try to reach more people and try to heal more people and things like that, or do more teaching, especially with his disciples, knowing that he's going to leave this world. But he chose to visit the town of Bethany, where 3 of his probably closest friends that he knew in this life would lived. And it was Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And he visited them, and Martha decided to throw this big dinner party in honor of Jesus. And what that tells me is, once again, that even as Jesus, the Son of God, came to this world for the purpose of giving his life for the sake of sins of mankind, that one of the things he valued so much was still his time and the relationship that he had with his people. He could have just kind of left these people behind, spending every moment, every last second of his life just doing ministry. But instead, he chose to spend this time with his friends. And I think when I look at that, and I look at even after the crucifixion, when Jesus comes back, and before his ascension, okay, another passage that I want to point us to, and I want you to also spend some time reflecting on this, is in John chapter 21, okay? It says that after Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. And this passage describes how after he was resurrected, very early in the morning, it says in verse 4 that Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He says, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net because of a large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Once again, this is Jesus after his resurrection. He's got about 40 days left in this world, okay? And what he chose to do was, instead of calling his disciples back and saying, "Hey guys, I have one last lesson that I want to teach you. I want to lay out for you how you are going to reach the world." Instead of doing that, he prepares this breakfast. And one of the first things he says to his disciples, "Come and have breakfast." Okay? And once again, whenever I read passages like this, I can't help but think about how important people are, but how important especially the relationship that God has with people, how important that is. So one of the things that we notice about even the ministry of Jesus is that more than the ministry itself or the teaching and things like that, we notice that Jesus spent an enormous amount of time with people, and he ministered to people on a personal level, not just giving perhaps teaching lessons at a synagogue. And whenever we see Jesus encounter people, like in John chapter 4 when he meets the Samaritan woman, and it happens in an everyday ordinary situation where he just was sitting by a well and this woman happens to come by. And John chapter 4 is just an amazing story of how Jesus would often minister to people. And the ministry that he did was not something that he would lay out a Bible lesson or a teaching, but what he really did was he spent time with people in a personal way, in a personal level. And that ministry was sometimes, that one encounter with Jesus can oftentimes transform somebody's life. And it's amazing to see that happen, and that definitely takes place in John chapter 4. Or when we look at another passage, like for instance in Luke chapter 6, is another place where he encounters this man who's got a shriveled hand. And in that instance, once again, what we see is that Jesus walks into these situations, and these people happen to be just present. And in that encounter, however, you'll see somebody's life who's just headed down in one direction, but that encounter totally transforms that life and makes it go in another way. And when we see once again these types of encounters with Jesus, what we see is that Jesus spends enormous amount of time and effort and energy to really care for people more than anything else. Okay, I'm sharing all these things because what I'm really getting at is this: is that even as you're away on this spring break, my feeling is that God wants you to spend time relaxing and resting. God wants you to spend time probably with maybe friends who are back home that you can catch up with. And perhaps God, I know that for instance, wants you to spend time with your folks and maybe spend some really quality time with people. But one other thing that God would probably want during this time of spring break for you is that perhaps God would want to spend some time with you as well, when you're not so pressed and you're not so stressed out and just struggling and trying to just get everything done. Perhaps in this moment, these few days that you have, that maybe God is trying to catch up with you as well. And that's what he values more than you evangelizing to your parents or your family members or relatives or friends. I think what God would find tremendously valuable is that he would want to spend this personal time with you. And just like how Jesus came to Peter after the resurrection and he said, "Come and have breakfast," I think that's the only agenda that really God has. Okay, Okay? It's not that he wants to teach you something, or, a lot of times we're always seeking something from God, perhaps an answer to a question we have, or, maybe you're praying about something about next year and things like that. But more than anything else, maybe God just wants to spend time with you. And in that moment, I think a lot of times what happens is that you and I come to encounter God, and we get to learn something, or we get to understand another aspect of who God really is. And sometimes that goes long ways, a lot more than just simply an answer to a question. Is that when you and I start to really come to know God and understand who He is, sometimes you'd be surprised how a lot of questions of life gets answered in those moments. And so when you have these encounters, and that's kind of what I'm sharing, is that especially for next 2-3 days, as I give you these 3-4 passages, I want you to really focus on them just one at a time, and just spend a moment and just ask these questions to God. One, is there something that God that you want to share with me? Okay. Second question is there something that God that you're trying to show me about who you are? Third question is perhaps is there something, God, that you want to show me about myself? Okay. And as you reflect on those questions, I want you to also think about this. Okay. I want you to think about the time that you're spending with God. Okay, what that means to you and how meaningful that was for you. Okay, and so don't just seek God out, but I want you to just wait on God as you look at these passages and as you meditate on it, and just spend some time with God each day. Just a little time. You don't have to spend hours of the day, but just spend little moments with God, and just reflect on the fact that we're approaching probably one of the most important days in some ways in a year, in terms of spiritually speaking, when we approach Easter and the resurrection, and when we approach Good Friday and Jesus' crucifixion on the cross. I hope those things all kind of would come together and converge in some ways in this one point, that you really matter to God, and to God, okay, you are the most important thing in His life in some ways, and the relationship that He has with you. And so I hope that you have an opportunity to really once again catch up with God, and God really is seeking you out more than you and I. Sometimes we always get so focused into the fact that we're trying so hard to encounter God, so hard to hear from God, or so hard to meet God. You'd be surprised how much God is trying to meet with you and to encounter you. And so that's why I think a lot of times when we do go away for times like retreats or mission trips, that we're able to encounter God, because we're giving God all of our attention, full attention to Him. In those moments, we recognize that God has been there all along, that He's been speaking to you all along, that He's been trying to get your attention all along in some ways. And so that's kind of what this is about. And I hope that after next 2-3 days, I think on Wednesday, that we're going to post a second video. And I hope you can kind of log on that time and check the website again for the next video. And I want to give you some things to think about for the following 3 days after that. And hopefully when you come back, maybe perhaps the service on Sunday, that you can join us for that, and you'll be much more ready, even spiritually, to welcome and to celebrate the season of Easter and the day of Easter celebration on Sunday. I hope that by Wednesday you would have to spend some time with God, and then you'll be able to see the new video that will be posted. And I just hope that during these times and the week that you're away, that you would really encounter God and have spent some quality time with Him.